Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for watching. I've got you guys an update on a big hurricane threat that we've got in the Atlantic. All right, we've been talking about this for the past couple of days. We have a few other spots in the Atlantic that also do have the potential to develop. But we're really going to keep our eyes on what's going on down in the Gulf of Mexico. All right, we've got that big system everyone's talking about. Just to keep you guys straight before we start this video, this channel has absolutely zero hype. We're not going to hype up this forecast. We're just going to go in depth, doing what we usually do, comparing models, and getting into the actual information that people need to look at to be able to kind of figure out where the storm may go and how strong it's going to be. We're not looking at every GFS run that has this becoming a Category 5 hurricane. That's not what we do on this channel. On this channel, it is straight facts, zero hype, and you don't need to worry about just any of the bad stuff that other weather channels could potentially be showing. So starting out here, we're just going to take a look at your current satellite loop. You can see, take a look at your current cloud tops. You can basically see our areas of development that we are looking out for. I get that old drawing off your screen. That was from last update. But basically, what we've got now is the remnants of Gordon. I believe this is the remnants of Gordon. Very, very small system. It's doing its thing out there in the Atlantic. Still believe it's got a very small chance of developing. We're not really expecting this to do anything. I mean, it's so small I can't even draw an L for it. So we're just going to see this probably end up dissipating as it moves up into the North Atlantic. Kind of an L for Gordon there, not to be able to re-strengthen. But other areas to look out for, you've just got, a few tropical waves trying to move their way off the coast of Africa. We already do have another area of interest that's it's gonna be a tropical wave that's gonna work its way into that area. But in the MDR, we are highlighting a chance of development. All right, for later into September. So we will talk about that if it's going to be a threat to land or not. But here's the big picture. This is what we're talking about in the Caribbean. Look at this big area of moisture. This is the beginning stages of your storm system that we've been talking about, all right? This is going to move its way towards the Bay of Campeche, the Yucatan Peninsula, Cuba, somewhere in this general direction. But you can see the shower and thunderstorm activity. This is it. All right, this is what is basically the just beginning stages of our big system that we're talking about, and this is what is basically just going to be bringing these potential impacts to the southeast, and that's exactly what we're going to go over in this video. So moving on here, we're going to take a look at the National Hurricane Center's current forecast. You can see right now we have 3 areas of development. We have a code yellow, code orange, and code red at the moment, but you can see for the remnants of Gordon, this is actually a subtropical low, an area of low pressure located about 700 miles southeast of Bermuda, continues to produce a small cluster of showers and thunderstorms northeast of its center. However, the low is embedded in a very dry environment, and therefore significant development is not expected while it moves generally northward at 5 to 10 miles per hour over the central subtropical Atlantic. So they did not specify that this is the remnants of Gordon. I believe this is technically still the remnants of Gordon. It's just really hard to, pick up on, or go back as far as when Gordon was actually a named storm. But as of right now, it's in a very, unfavorable environment for developing. Very, very tiny system, little cluster of showers and thunderstorms. So, and it's also a subtropical low, so we are not expecting that to develop. Next storm, well, this is as of 8 p.m. today. We have a tropical wave that is expected to move westward from the coast of Africa. So we saw that on satellite. We're expecting a tropical wave to move westward from the coast of Africa on Sunday or Monday. Gradual development of the system is possible thereafter, and a tropical depression could form next week while the wave moves westward across the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. All right, when you see a medium chance of development this early, that is usually a pretty significant sign that the forecasters out there at the National Hurricane Center have a pretty tight grip on the idea that this storm is going to do something. All right, we haven't seen this high of a chance of developing this early in a while. This is not me hyping up this forecast. This is me just telling you guys that we don't typically see this much confidence in a forecast from the National Hurricane Center than what we're seeing right now. So we'll keep our eyes, out for this. But as of right now, this is your area of interest. Notice how if this were to be a cone, it would actually most likely go north of the Lesser Antilles. So it looks like this storm is going to be heading off the coast of Africa, and we'll see obviously what direction it's going to be going in. But hopefully, we're hoping that it's going to move somewhere like this, and we'll just have to hope that our weather pattern, moves it away from the United States. But obviously, it's not even off the coast of Africa, so we'll have to save those later details for when we actually get them. Now, this is your big area of interest. We are now up to a code red, high 70% chance of development throughout the next 7 days out here in the northwestern Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. A broad area of low pressure should form during the next few days. We kind of already have that over the northwestern Caribbean Sea. As of right now, basically, we've got a lot of showers and thunderstorms and the adjacent portions of Central America. Thereafter, gradual development of the system is expected, and a tropical depression is likely to form as the system moves slowly northward across the northwestern Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico through the end of the week, through the end of next week. Regardless of development, this system is expected to produce heavy rains over portions of Central America during the next 7 days. So watch out for that if you happen to be watching from Central America. But as of right now, 0% chance of this developing. This is not going to develop in the next 48 hours, but we do have a 70% chance of this developing throughout the next 7 days. So chances are increasing, and you can see our area of interest has actually broadened up pretty good. Right now, it's covering basically the entire Yucatan Peninsula, Bay of Campeche, and then into the central Gulf of Mexico, and does concerningly go all the way up to Louisiana. So they're just, definitely keeping their eyes on this very closely, and I think that the East Coast and the entire Gulf Coast really just, be on the watch for the system and just, what these new details coming in are looking like. So we're going to compare the GFS and the European model for both our precipitation and for our relative humidity, basically telling us how moist the air is going to be according to the GFS and European model. And we're going to take a look at basically just the signals that we've gotten in the past few hours and just going to break them down and see why the models are showing them and how possible it is for those those signals to be actually happening. So take a look at what the GFS is showing. You can see as of right now, this is your big blob of green, your big area of interest, trying to do its thing, trying to get its act together. All right, notice how we get into Monday, and we already do have 1,004 millibar low. This is trying to form into an invest, maybe even an invest at this point. So we would officially be investigating the system, but potentially even close to a tropical depression, as this is, trying to get gear up to move into the Gulf of Mexico. Now we take this out all the way to Wednesday. This is Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. This is really starting to get its act together. It's 1,001 millibar low. You can see our isobars now starting to show up a little bit more clearly. The stronger the storm, the more isobars you're going to get. And you can see, what you're going to get is you're going to get rain bands that are going to start to circulate around the center of the storm, starting to see the storm really start to wrap up, start to tighten up. This is what we call, that intensification. This is what I like. This is what I would see or look to see in a strengthening and developing tropical system. And you can see as we take this out into Wednesday, this is by 2 p.m. Wednesday, so midday Wednesday, we now have a 992 millibar low. So this is, at this point, would be Tropical Storm Helene, and then this is now moving into the Gulf of Mexico. And the fact that it's already would be a named storm at this point, as it's just moving to the Gulf of Mexico, probably would mean that we would get a very strong system, because it's going to have all its time to move over the Gulf of Mexico and obviously make a landfall somewhere. That is not an official track, that arrow. That is just me taking an absolute wild guess. But we zoom in here to the southeast, and you can see what the GFS is showing for the rest of this run. This really starts to go into rapid intensification. You drop from a 992 to a 977 millibar low as we get into Thursday. This is Wednesday night into Thursday. This is pretty far out, over 100 hours out. You can see that this is already most likely a Cat 1, Cat 2 hurricane, and this is bearing down on either the Florida coastline or just the rest of the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, you continue to play this out, and you can see it's really starting to slow down. It's taking its time over the waters, meaning that it's got more time to soak up all that, moist air, the extremely high above average SSTs, sea surface temperatures, and then boom, you got a 960 millibar low, rapidly dropping, rapidly intensifying. Notice how you've got a huge moisture surge, big time moisture surge up into the southeast. This has been a common theme from the GFS and other models. So the fact that you have such a big moisture surge means that this storm is going to do nothing but go right up into the southeast. All right, you're not going to see the storm take a turn west. So if this run were to play, if this exact scenario were to play out or something similar, we would probably see the western half of the Gulf of Mexico spared by the system, and then you could see that the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico might not end up so lucky. Now that is not an official forecast. That is basically just what the current trend from the GFS is. Still 120 hours out, so still enough time to pretty drastically change. But you can see this really just starts to drop very considerably. We get into the rest of Thursday, just watching the storm as it approaches Florida, still dropping. And now you see the 950s. We go from a 960 to a 951 millibar low. Now you're talking most likely a probably a low to mid Category 3 hurricane. You got a major hurricane at this point. This is a legit major hurricane, 591 millibars, and it's bearing down in Florida. And then boom, you get a landfall pretty much just north of where Hurricane Idalia hit last year, or just north of where Hurricane Debby hit. And you can see this makes landfall as a 952 millibar low. Looks like by middle of the night Thursday night into Friday morning, so about 2 a.m. Friday morning, we see this make a landfall, and this just keeps chugging. It's got such a big moisture pull and moisture return from the Gulf and from the Atlantic that it maintains itself as a hurricane all the way into the Carolinas. This is so weird that the GFS is showing this, but it's actually having this still as a 975 millibar low. And you could argue that that's still a Category 2 hurricane. Still as it's all the way into South Carolina. At this point, you'd probably think that this has got to be a tropical depression, weak tropical storm, tropical depression. This is still a Category 2 hurricane potentially, just because of how large the system potentially it's going to be, and just how much of a moisture return it's got. It's got so much moisture to still work with that it can maintain itself even as it goes in the Carolinas. And then that's when it really starts to fizzle out once it gets past the Carolinas into Virginia, and that's that. So it looks like end of next week, towards the weekend, is when we could be potentially talking about impacts. Now, we still don't really know where this is going to go. And you look at the 12Z run of the GFS, pretty different. It almost has this thing not even for me at all. This has probably been the lightest run out of all of them. 988 millibar low. So probably a tropical storm, maybe a low-end Category 1 hurricane, brings a heck ton of rainfall into the southeastern United States, into Florida, into Georgia, into Alabama, but it does not quite form into a hurricane, and we get spared from the winds, at least, that could potentially result from the system, although the rain definitely looks concerning with all runs of the GFS. We could quickly go over the 6Z run. 6Z run, you can see, does show a little bit of a weaker scenario compared to what the 18Z run of tonight is showing, but we still do get a 972 hurricane that makes landfall right in the center of the Big Bend region of Florida, right by where Hurricane Idalia made landfall last year. And, that's pretty much what we've gotten from all the runs today. So we'll continue watching this trend from the GFS, but a very concerning run out of the 18Z tonight. And so we'll see what the OZ run looks like, and obviously what the other runs from tomorrow are going to look like. But, that looks pretty concerning to me, and obviously I'm not going to hype this up, not going to, pay too much attention to this. And obviously, we just gotta have to wait and see if this is a legit possible scenario, or if this is just the 18Z GFS getting drunk once again. So, we look at the European model. All right, we're going to look at the 12Z European model so we can get the full 240 hours. And you can see, we take this out pretty much till about the same time frame as when the GFS had this starting to form, all the way to Wednesday by 8 a.m. We're waking up on Wednesday. And this is a 1,003 millibar low. All right, this big blob of rain centered over pretty much the Yucatan Peninsula here. It's just a big blob of rain. This, I will say, is a little bit farther to the west of where the GFS was showing this happening. So I do think that there is still some potential model disagreement there. Now, the European model has been a much weaker or much lighter, model for this system. It's been a much less aggressive model than the GFS and the European AI model. But you can see that it still does have this storm potentially becoming a named storm. I mean, it does strengthen to the very last minute, gets down to about a 994 millibar low. Actually, does make landfall as a 992 millibar low, but it's so different than the GFS. How this thing barely strengthens to a tropical storm, but doesn't even get close to becoming a hurricane. In the GFS, just like every run pounds a hurricane into the southeast. That's the big difference that we see here. So the European model just really, really a lot weaker than what the GFS has been consistently showing, but it does show a lot of rainfall in the southeast. That's a big concern from the models, not only the GFS, but even the European model, even the models that don't hype these kind of forecasts up. They all are showing potentially intense rainfall that could lead to flash flooding out in the southeast. So if you're in Florida, if you're anywhere on the Gulf Coast except for pretty much Texas, from Louisiana to Florida, I would be concerned, genuinely concerned, for the potential flooding impacts from the system. I will repeat, I think personally that if this storm develops into Helene and it makes landfall somewhere in the Gulf Coast, there will be flooding, and the flooding is going to be bad. Mark my words. I've seen it from the models. They are continuously nonstop showing this very very intense threat, and I really do think that the flooding could potentially be serious for the storm if it does organize in time and if it does end up making a landfall. But the timing for the European model, it's pretty much right around the same time. A little bit later though, looks like about 12 hours later. This does make landfall. In between, late afternoon, early evening hours of Friday, and then into Saturday. Is where we see this make landfall, pretty much just into the far western Florida Panhandle as a 992 millibar low. So very different from the European and the GFS, a little bit different on the timing, a little bit different on the location of where this could potentially make landfall. But you can see, once again, the West getting spared, but the East, you gotta be, on high alert. You gotta be continuously watching the forecast because you guys are currently under the gun for a potential tropical cyclone landfall as of right now, as of, what the current model trend is from the GFS and the European model. So we're going to take a look here at the GFS. We're going to take a look at the humidity levels, basically showing us how moist or how dry the air around how moist or how dry the general environment is ahead of this storm. We're going to start out with the GFS here on the 18Z run. We're going to break down why this 18Z run actually, went bonkers and why this actually showed a pretty wild scenario. So you can see the storm is moving up through the southeast. Already look how big of a moisture return this has. This thing is just absolutely pulling moisture up into itself. All right, you've got dry air it's not getting wrapped into the storm like other hurricanes have struggled with. Francine was just, Francine had dry air like this that you see here into Arkansas. Francine was just wrapping dry air into its core, and that's why it did not strengthen into a major hurricane or beyond. And that's why it only made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane. All right, that may not be the case with this storm because it's got such a rich moisture return. You can see, I mean, pretty much 100% humidity through this large swath here of the eastern side of the storm. It's just pulling moisture into this wind field here. This is a very, very big system here from the GFS, and we've seen this trend from the models, how this could be a very large system. Notice how ahead of it, all right, what it's got is I believe this is an anticyclonic flow that is, just off the coast of the southeast. This is not going to bother the storm. This is actually going to help bring the storm into the southeast. This is going to keep the dry air away from it. That's going to allow for this storm to be able to move basically right up in this region because it's going to be attracted by all this warm air, all this moisture that's way up here into the mid Atlantic. So whenever you get a little system like this, a trough that's going to move through, this is going to bring in obviously that warm cold air, or that dry cold air from the north, and that's how it's going to get that negative tilt. And basically, what this trough is going to do, it's going to yank the system up into the southeast, and that's why we could potentially have those southeast impacts. But you see what happens, and this just continues and continues to, inch towards the southeast, takes its time over the waters, and it doesn't start to pull in moisture until it basically makes landfall. I mean, it's just so strong, and I mean, look at this. This moisture return is so large, so long lasting, that by the time it's making landfall, you still have all this moisture from Cuba, from the Caribbean, as this is already up into Florida. You're still getting moisture all the way from down south, down there. It's getting all pulled up all the way into the system and wrapped into the core. That's how strong the GFS wants the storm to be. And now, if that actually happens, then that would be a very, very just bad scenario. That'd be worst case scenario. But then when you see this, this huge amount, abundant amount of moisture, abundant amount of warm, humid air, you already know this storm's gonna just want to absolutely take over and devour that, and that's why it's gonna move right into this region. You can see, I'll keep my arrow here. Look, perfectly goes right along with this arrow because it goes right into the most moist area. So pretty wild, pretty worst case scenario there, but just take in just the amount of moisture it's going to be pulling up. You have a huge environment ahead of it, which, by the way, if you get a trough here that's going to pull up this storm, eventually the storm's going to be associated with the trough, meaning that you're probably going to get widespread impacts pretty far up the southeast and even into the mid-Atlantic. But also, if you have a huge moisture pull, you could definitely have flooding concerns and rainfall concerns out into Cuba, because there could definitely be some spotty areas of rainfall associated with that very moist air. All right, so this dry air is going to be wrapped into the trough, which is the system that's pulling this potential hurricane up into the southeast. This trough has nothing to do with the hurricane other than pulling it north. So that's what's going to be kind of channeling this dry air away from the hurricane and basically just into the trough, if that makes sense. So this is how the flow of things are going to be working. And it's just, I mean, it's wild. It really is. And this is a textbook hurricane setup, textbook landfall setup. Worst case scenario right here from the GFS. Nothing to be took seriously, completely seriously, other than the fact that this is a strong signal of a potential strong hurricane in the southeast. Now you take a look at the European model here, and you can see the European model quickly. All right, for our humidity and our moisture levels in the atmosphere around the system, it does show a pretty decent moisture return, not as aggressive as the GFS, but you do get some pretty decent moisture that's coming up into the system. Notice how the GFS had this much more intense farther south, but the European does actually do. I mean, it does show some of this, but just not quite as intense as the GFS. You do get some high pressure that's going to block the system, or I should change my pen here. You got high pressure up here that's going to try to block this system from going into the northeast, and the system is just not going to want to go into these dry air conditions, and so it kind of just deflects the storm from heading too far up north, and that also weakens it out completely because it makes landfall as a very weak 992 millibar low. So best case scenario pretty much from the European model, showing this make a quick landfall and then just kind of getting pulled into our weather pattern here and getting dried out. So there's pretty big difference there from the GFS and the European model. The GFS for our driving pattern here, you can see this is the trough that digs down. You can see it's a decently strong trough, not as strong as we first initially anticipated, but it does still show a decently strong trough that kind of just digs down here. I've got a cricket in the basement. But this digs down here into the Midwest here, and it just kind of picks up the storm and puts it into brings it into the southeast. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. So we'll continue to watch this, continue to see how this plays out. It's gonna be very interesting to see, but obviously, stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, and I'll continuing to give you guys these non-hype forecasts for this upcoming storm. We'll continue to watch these concerning runs from the GFS, potentially from the European model, but really just got to continue watching what happens, and we'll just have to wait and see. So once again, that's all I got for you guys. I'll see you guys next video.